Hey everyone, welcome to episode 101 of New Slang. I am your host, music journalist Thomas Mooney. This time around, I am joined by singer-songwriter Taylor Alexander. Taylor released Good Old Fashioned Pain, his full-length debut album, just over a year ago. We really dive deep on the ins and outs of this album. It's kind of like a coming-of-age album, but not like in the teenage kind of way. It's more so about that second spurt that happens in your 20s, which I think that second spurt is such a strange part of your life. You're really just starting to truly realize who you are and realize just how difficult the world really is. There's a lot of pressures and stress and anxiety that happens during this time, despite also not necessarily being tied to anyone or anything. For a lot of people, myself included, not having a spouse, children, or even like things like a mortgage or multiple car payments. I think the stress that happens most so in your 20s is a cultural and societal pressure and stress. At times you feel as though you're maybe not advancing at the same rate as your peers. You try and find that balance between responsibility and having fun. And it's all like this really strange, weird time that's filled with really great experiences, but also these incredible lows. And I think it's only later that you realize that you didn't have to try so hard or be so hard on yourself either. That's like the kind of coming of age that this record is really built on. And that's what also makes this album really fascinating, because it really goes into the ins and outs of that strange, weird time in not just Taylor's life, but in a lot of people's lives. Anyway, Taylor and I discuss more of that, moving to Nashville, artists like Bright Eyes and Elliott Smith, and of course we talk about songwriting. Before we get right into the interview, I wanted to talk to you a second about podcasting and Buzzsprout. It feels like everyone has a podcast these days. It's been really great to see people use podcasting as a storytelling outlet and to find like-minded people. You may have seen New Slang take a really big jump this past year, and one of the main reasons has undoubtedly been transitioning over to Buzzsprout as my podcast host. They've really made all the quote-unquote unfun things about podcasting so easy. For starters, that's why New Slang is on every major podcasting platform now, and why it's been so uniform and organized online. I've always enjoyed speaking with songwriters and bands and artists. That's a given. But now Buzzsprout has made it so much easier on the publishing side. So if you've ever been interested in launching your own podcast, I'd highly recommend Buzzsprout, which if you follow the link in the show notes, you'll be able to A, sign up with Buzzsprout, B, be given a $20 Amazon gift card, and C, help support New Slang. Again, that link will be in the show notes. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to New Slang if this is your first time listening. It's on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and a host of others. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, I just launched the New Slang online merch store this past Friday. It's super small right now, but I have various koozies and stickers, magnets, and buttons. I'm thinking about getting coffee mugs because that just seems like my kind of merch. Let me know if you're interested in a New Slang coffee mug. What I envision is the kind that the old timers would be sipping out of at whatever diner or cafe or truck stop that you remember as a kid. For me, I remember the Comanche Springs truck stop in Fort Stockton as being that place. Anyway, find all your New Slang merch needs at newslangpodcast.bigcartel.com. As always, I'll throw a link into the show notes. Okay, enough of all of this stuff. Here is Taylor Alexander. Your record came out last year, back in April.
Yeah.
So it's right around that year-round mark. That's always, I guess, like that point where you can, the anniversary moments are kind of like where you can kind of do a little bit of reflecting on something. Mm-hmm. Did that year just kind of like fly by? What are your thoughts about like the record, like, a year later?
Well, yeah, I mean, the year really did fly by. It was almost like I it feels like I just put it out, and I felt like as soon as I looked up, it was already a year old. I mean, I guess like just reflecting on that year, it was almost like the real work didn't start until after it came out. And it was kind of a year spent sending tons of emails and just trying really hard to get shows and connect with people and try to get the record into as many people's hands as I could. So it was almost, I kind of had my head down all year, working a couple jobs and sending a lot of emails is kind of what it felt like.
Yeah. I one of the things I always want, I want listeners to realize, fans to realize, is that whenever you put a record out, like the studio, the writing, all that is that's obviously the key to it all, but that's not the work. The work is all the, like you said, the emails, the trying to get into people's hands, doing the interviews, trying to line up everything. And that's the part where you're like, oh my gosh, and I've heard some people kind of talk about how when they've put out a record, they almost turn off the creative side, because it feels like the marketing and the doing all the other stuff is exhausting in a way. Did you kind of feel like that? Did you feel like you lifted the needle, if you will, on the creative aspect?
After having heard you ask that and thinking about it, I definitely think I did. Being 100% independent to the point, where just anything that is happening is something that I'm having to facilitate in one way or another. I really didn't get very much creative work done in the year since. Now recently I've been able to, kind of get my head back down and work some more on some creative stuff. But it's so emotionally draining to try to push an album that a lot of times I just found myself just it's not feeling inspired necessarily, but just feeling tired, just being like, man, I just the last thing that I can really think about doing right now is picking up a guitar and trying to work my way through something, but yeah, I definitely feel that, especially thinking about it now.
Yeah. Even I'm not writing or a record or anything like that, but I always felt, a little bit mentally drained after I've finished an article or something, and what I've realized, what I've kind of done lately is trying to, split those up, where if I'm writing something, or if I'm I'm doing this interview with you right here, this is what I'm doing today. Really, I'm not sitting out trying to schedule so much stuff out, because I'll just leave that for an entire day, because it is one of those things where you kind of, your mind just kind of goes blah at some point. And I don't know, I don't know if it's just it sounds like we're complaining, but it's just I think part of what you have to do before you you get tired of it and decide to do something else. Do you feel like that little bit of that drain too whenever you're on the creative side, when you're writing? That not necessarily a drain, but you're it's just kind of you put all this energy into this moment trying to write these songs or this song, and then after, you're just kind of I gotta just watch crap TV or something for a minute.
Yeah, no doubt. I think I tend to be sort of a burst writer anyways, where I'll write maybe not the majority, but a decent amount of the songs within a pretty short period, right? Maybe over the course of a few months. Generally, the last record was, generally speaking, most of it was in the span of a few months. And so using all that energy right then in a big spurt, I definitely am okay, I need to go, well, I was going to say I need to go read or something, but usually after that, I'm even too tired for that. It's I need to play video games or watch TV, like you said, just too tired. But yeah, there's it does feel like there's a certain amount of, you have a certain amount of creative energy stored up, and you spend all of it at once sometimes, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of break that habit though, because it is, not necessarily the best way to work all the time, where you're kind of counting on burst of energy.
Yeah, like I guess like with time and with age, like I've tried to get more like scheduled. You know what I mean? Like try
Hmm.
and like I guess like cut my time up better. And I don't know, like it's still like it's one of those things where it's strange to try and because obviously there are songwriters who write every day and
Hmm.
they have that routine, that little bit of normalcy of like writing with a cup of coffee or like in the afternoon or the evening or whatever their thing is. But like it's such a it's strange to try and I guess like quantify the magic, the quote unquote magic of art and creativity. You know what I mean? It feels like
Hmm.
you're kind of like I don't know, trying to take the joy or the fun out of it. I don't know. You got to get better, but like you get what I'm saying. You understand like the what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
and I think even what I was saying about, that last record having been written like that was, I think it was almost more symptomatic of the fact that I don't really have a consistent routine schedule, just because I have, I've been working normal jobs, multiple part-time jobs or whatever it is. Like when I was working on Good Old Fashioned Pain, I was working a warehouse gig, and it wasn't like a consistent schedule of like every single day you're in at 9 and you're out, at whenever. It was like some days we had, because what we were doing is like an event rental. So we would have to kind of mold our schedule around when the event needed drop off and pick up. So you're kind of like up and down all the time with different, like, literally like one day you might not go into work until 10 p.m. and just do like a quick 4 hour, pickup or whatever. So like just being that schedule, how it is like, I almost had to get into a rhythm of trying to get as much out as possible whenever I could find time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think being able to have a consistent schedule would probably be the best thing. But I'm kind of like in that position now too, where I've just got like a normal kind of a cafe job, and it's not the exact same schedule every day. So it's hard to kind of fall into that routine. So I definitely crave that routine a lot of times. But it can be kind of hard to find the same time every day.
Right. When inspiration hits though, like what is like your typically like the thing that you are you like a note taker? Do you try and like put it in your phone in a recording kind of thing, or like what do you usually do to make sure like you latch onto that idea and then it's like not lost to the ether?
Oh yeah. I mean, sometimes it's like if I have like a melodic idea or something, then I'll literally try to hum it into the voice memo thing on the phone. I generally don't write as much stuff melody first. It's usually like a lyrical line. And then, I really abuse the notepad app on the phone all the time, just writing down random lines and stuff. And then, I think when I sit down to actually write something, like after I've had the idea or I've got a couple lines that I just kind of typed in the phone real quick, I prefer to sit down with a pen and paper and just kind of map it out so that I can see it. Maybe I'm visual that way or something. I like to write it and be able to cross stuff out and, draw arrows and move stuff around and kind of work it like a puzzle in that way. So, but yeah, I mean, I definitely use the heck out of the iPhone. a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I always love the like the physical aspect of seeing someone write with like a
Hmm.
notepad or like whatever the case is. I mean, like it doesn't have to be something where just as random as like, oh, I was writing this song on scraps of receipts that I had in my truck, or it doesn't have to be something like that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like if you somebody it's just really interesting to see what people try and do to create that vibe, to try and get that all the other stuff right, to make sure it's easy to get written down, in a
Hmm.
notebook or a notepad, or scraps pieces of paper or whatever the case is, certain pens, are you a certain pen kind of person?
Yeah, but I can't remember even what they are. I just know the ones that I like, but I can't remember the brand.
That's
So maybe I'm a poser in that respect. I should probably know my brand, but
well, see, that's how I am. Like it's just I don't know what they are, but I know what isn't.
yeah,
And
yeah. I know a bad one when I had one,
yeah. And I was telling someone earlier, part of I think that for me is I'm left-handed, and so like certain pens will just like jam on me because like when you're left-handed, you're like pushing the ink versus pulling it, and so like part of
I've
it
never
also
thought
is,
about that like that. That's interesting.
yeah. Well, it's I can go off on
Yeah.
like my left-handed rant, like how like the raw deal of being left-handed, but
Yeah.
it's part of like that reason too is like pushing the ink it can just make a pen just feel like it's dry all of a sudden. You're like, what the hell's going on here? So I don't know. Like sometimes it's the right pen. I've seen some people do it with like markers or Sharpies. I don't know if I feel like that's a little too intense. I don't know.
Yeah. The markers, like they make too much of a mess when I use them. I have like really, really messy handwriting anyway. And so when I do anything that is thicker than a pen, I make a complete mess over whatever.
Yeah.
To drive teachers crazy in school. Like every single teacher that I had in elementary school was like trying everything that they could to improve my handwriting. And I don't know what the problem is, but it hasn't improved in any meaningful way.
Right. Yeah. Like that's some days I have like really great handwriting, and then other days it's complete just junk, and I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm writing down here. It'll be like 5 minutes later, I'll be like, what is this? I don't know. I was gonna ask about like these songs specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Like how big of a gap, or not a gap, but like a period are they from? Is there like anything like super old that you just felt like, oh, I need to have this on this record, or is it all typically within a pretty decent period of time?
Yeah. There's actually one that's way older than the rest, which is a little bit out of the ordinary for me, because I usually have disassociated from stuff from when I was I guess I would have been 18 or so when I wrote the title track "Good Old Fashioned Pain." I must have been 18 or 19. I can't exactly remember the year, but it was a few years before I moved to Nashville, and I played that song with a band that I was in for a couple of years. And when I came to Nashville, I just kind of stopped playing anything that I previously had in my pocket, except for like brand new stuff that I wrote right before I moved. And, cause it's kind of this crazy thing in Nashville. Like I ended up immediately in East Nashville at this now defunct venue called The Building. And the building was kind of magic because literally you had no idea who was going to show up for open mic. Like literally, like I've seen Tim Carroll play open mic there, who's like one of my, like, I absolutely love his songwriting. I saw, you would see like hit writer, like Dave Pahanish, who's written like some great country tunes, like radio stuff that you would recognize. He would just like hop up because he lived in the neighborhood, hop up, play a couple songs for open mic. And I was, then I was running into, people that are still my friends that I was like, good Lord, like the songwriting is just, I felt it was just way better than what I had. And so I just quit playing anything that I had. I was like, dude, I need to go lock myself in my room and try to like get anywhere near some of the stuff that I'm seeing. And so by virtue of that, Good Old Fashioned Pain kind of got put on the back burner. And I didn't really play very much, but there was a specific event that I remember where me and my now wife, at the time we were just dating, we went up to New York City and played a show at a place called the Sidewalk Cafe. And we kind of almost did like a little bit of a writer's round with the two of us. And I was kind of running out of material and I needed to play one more tune. And so I pulled that one out. as like, okay, I'll try to play this one again. And after I played it, we were like packing up and stuff. And somebody asked me, if that, like, who wrote that one? And I was like, oh, that's actually one of my kind of older ones. And they're like, oh, I really like that one. And I was like, that kind of like made me rethink it a little bit. Like, maybe people would dig this one. Maybe I'm being too harsh on myself or whatever. And, I got some good encouragement on that one. And I was like, you know what, let's give this one a proper chance and actually record it and release it. And so I did that. And then it became the title track of the album. The rest of them were written after I got to Nashville, and they're all within, like I was saying earlier, within a fairly small period. Like the bulk of them are probably within like 3 months of each other, but there's a couple that are kind of outliers. Like Real Good at Saying Goodbye is one that I wrote fairly early in Nashville. And then that's probably the oldest one in the batch other than Good Old Fashioned Pain. The rest of them were all kind of in that 3 or 4 month period, probably. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Which would have been 2000, somewhere around 2016.
Yeah.
It took me a few years to get the record out. I mean, we started recording it in 2017, when I was 25, and then it didn't come out until after I turned 27. So yeah, it took almost 2 years from start to finish to finally release.
Yeah. Well, a couple things on that. It's really, sometimes it's interesting to see whenever, I guess maybe like that kind of song, like the title track, you're maybe like too close to it for too long, I guess. Just, you know what I mean? And then it takes someone else to give you like permission to be like, hey, this is like this is a great song. And then like, that's when you go, oh yeah, I guess so. Maybe it is. Maybe I do need to play it. So
yeah, this is something that I was just talking to my wife about this week, because we're actually working on her album right now. And I was kind of joking offhand that like, I feel like I have no objective view on my own work, like at all. The only thing that I can tell about it is when I think it's done, but I couldn't tell you if it's good. Like, so I don't know if that's like some deep seated emotional problem or something I need to work on, but I need people like my wife to hear a song and be like, no, that's actually good. You should be proud of that. You did good work. Like I can tell when it's done, but I can't tell if it's actually good or not. It's probably just, insecurity or something.
Right. Well, I mean, it's very easy to, especially if you've been it's very easy to talk yourself out of something. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you can get, especially whenever you've been working on something so hard and so intensely, like it's very easy to get lost in the woods on it and not really know heads to down, you know what I mean? Or like forward and backward. And you're just kind of like lost in it. And it takes like that one person like reaching out to like grab you and say like, hey, yeah, no, this is good. Or obviously like, hey, this is bad. Stop doing this, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
Is your wife
even the gentle, like, oh, this isn't your best work, don't hate yourself, but some of your other stuff is better, even that's helpful.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, is your wife typically like the first person you show something to, the first?
Funny enough, no. I'm
okay.
generally way too embarrassed to show her stuff. And it's kind of a funny story on one of the tunes on the record. I think the 9th track, I Guess I Moved On, was one that wasn't part of the original 10 songs that we cut when we went into the studio. And we had recorded a different song, and I for whatever reason, it was another one that was from way back, and I was like, I just don't really relate to this so much anymore, and I don't know, I just didn't really want to release it. And so I was like, okay, I got to rack my brain and think of another song to put on the record. And my wife like talked me into playing some stuff that I had in like my notebook for her. And it was like, it's so embarrassing. It really shouldn't be embarrassing, but I think since we're both songwriters, like, and I also think she's very good. It's like embarrassing sometimes to like show it. Like, I'm also the kind of person, like if I'm out at like, you know, like a guitar pool or something with a bunch of songwriter friends or something, and people start passing around the guitar, I just get like, that's like the most horrifying thing ever. Like I can't think of anything worse than like a bunch of songwriters passing around a guitar. I'm like, not going to play, you know, I don't care who's there. It's like, so I don't know what, you know, that's, like I said, that's probably some weird something, but, you know, I showed her, you know, not to go off on a rabbit trail, but I showed her that song and she was like, oh, that's, you know, you should put that one on there. I kind of felt a little insecure about that one because it's, I mean, as far as like a classic country format, it's fairly normal in that it is like a verse with a refrain each time and no bridge or chorus really. There's like a instrumental break. So like there's like some Merle Haggard songs and stuff that are kind of in that format. But, you know, as far as like modern styles, I was just a little bit insecure about it because it is just 3 verses at the end of the day. But I'm glad we ended up recording it. I think it turned out really cool. But yeah, no, generally don't show her stuff, like, which, you know, she actually kind of, she makes fun of me a little bit for, because she's like, I always like it whenever you show me stuff. I'm like, just too scared.
Yeah, I mean, like, I get it. I mean, it's very, we're taught to like tell all of our songwriters, you need to be vulnerable and intimate and write about these like, these raw emotions, and then also at the same time going like, now play them in front of everybody, you know, or like play them in front of that person like that song's about, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
sometimes I'm assuming you probably feel this exactly right here is the, you know, sometimes playing that song in front of a family member or your family in general is a lot more difficult than playing them in front of a crowd of people.
Oh man. Yeah. You don't know how right you are about that. Like, you know, there's definitely lines on the record that I wanted to be honest with myself and put on, you know, put it like nothing like crazy, but just like, sometimes I do want to play a show where like no one that I'm related to is there, just so that they don't feel like they like screwed up or something. It's like, you know, like there's like, like I said, I mean, it's not like none of the songs are about like really going off the deep end or anything like that. But I wrote some like kind of vulnerable things about kind of my mindset and what I was thinking. And I was like, I don't want them to worry. So it really is kind of, it can be kind of distressing to have to play them in front of, especially like parents, you know? So I'm like, hey, I'm over this stuff. You know, it's fine, but still it's weird. I don't want you to have to hear it.
Yeah, like I don't know. Like I've never played. I don't play anything, so like I don't ever play anything for the parents or my parents or my grandparents. But you know, it's sometimes I'll be like, oh man, especially like one of my grandmothers will always like talk about and share like my recent articles or whatever, and I'm like, she's asked me a couple of times when I've been over at her house and she's like washing dishes, she's like, well, read that new one. And I'm like, I'm not going to read the article. Like you're like, it's like a story or something. No, I don't think that's how this is going to work. You read it in your own time. I don't know. It's,
yeah, preferably when I'm nowhere near.
Right. This episode is sponsored by the Blue Light Live, my all-time favorite music venue and bar. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult on small businesses, music venues, bars, and musicians. There are a handful of ways that you can help, though. For starters, go over to www.bluelightlubbock.com, click on the merch tab at the top of the page, and order yourself a Blue Light hat, t-shirt, and koozie. Second, if you haven't purchased Monday Night Lights, a 50-song compilation of Lubbock songwriters organized by songwriter and photographer extraordinaire Charlie Stout and myself, head over to www.mondaynightlights.com. The proceeds of this 50-song collection go directly to the bartending staff. We launched it a few months back and we were blown away by the response and reception. And of course, if you're just hearing about it now, go ahead and get it today. This collection will never be on iTunes or on Apple Music, so the only spot you'll be able to get it at is at mondaynightlights.com. I'll throw both links into the show notes for easy access. All right, back to the show. One of the things I wanted to go back on was, you talking about how this record is it took a minute to record. Mm-hmm. Is like, I guess like one of those things is like one of the scarier aspects of making a record that the process goes over a couple of years or, over a large period of time, a few months, is like one of the things that like in the back of your mind going, what if I am over this song or these songs by the time it's released? Does that ever creep in?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said earlier, it took almost, maybe a little over a year and a half from start to finish to get the record out. And there was definitely a little bit of like, dude, if I hear that intro one more time, I'm going to lose it. Like I'm so tired of this. And then like, you've also picked it apart after you've gotten the final mixes back and you're like, man, I should have played this, or, man, I wonder if there was like a better line that I should have, put in this one song, or like, really start second guessing everything. And then you're kind of tired of the tunes a little bit because you've just listened to them into the ground. And there was a little bit of that, but then like when it came out and like, people were reviewing it favorably or sending me like, encouragement or whatever, then it kind of like revitalized it a little bit, where I was like, okay, now, I just, I think everybody to a certain extent, especially artists, at the end of the day, we want people to like our stuff. We want it to be edifying or interesting or entertaining. So it definitely kind of relit the fire a little bit by the time it was released after that. But now I'm kind of, back in that mindset of like, I can't wait to start a new project because it's been a full year and I'm kind of, just thinking about some different stuff and writing some new stuff. And then I just want to get on to the next project. So.
Yeah. I always think that you always come across like these artists or these songwriters who, they try and go they lean too far into like the romanticism of it all. Is like, mm-hmm. I don't write these songs for anyone but me. I don't need your approval. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get that. But also at the same time, like you wouldn't be putting them out if you're not like wanting people to like them at least. And I don't know, right. Like it's, I'm sure you've met some of these, like some songwriters like that who are just like too far that direction. And like, I'd rather have that one fan. And that fan.
Yeah. I definitely, that's definitely kind of a romantic ideal. Like, oh, I only make music. And it's like, I do make music for me because I find it to be, productive and makes me feel good to create something. Right.
Right.
But like at the end of the day, like the reason that I release music is because I want people to also enjoy it.
Exactly.
Or, to hear what I'm thinking or whatever. And that's also, that's why we go play shows too, so that we can share the work in a public forum and, kind of hang out with each other and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I definitely, I kind of realized that I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit, because I was saying I don't know when stuff is good, and somebody would probably counter with, well, if you don't know if something's good, then why are you putting it out? And it's like, it's kind of this kind of weird inner conflict of like, well, I know that I said the thing that I wanted to say as clearly as I can. Maybe what I mean by I'm not sure if it's good is I'm not sure if other people are going to dig it or not. That may be where the insecurity is fundamentally. But yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, like being vulnerable on a record and then having other people hear it and judge it. That's kind of mind blowing kind of thing.
Yeah. Like that's why I really I don't like to do album reviews. I don't like it. That's just like, everything is up for like a conversation about like if this is good, if this is great, all that kind of stuff. But like just doing that is like the most like, I don't know, soul sucking aspect of being like a journalist. I would rather like talk with an artist about their songs or their records and like those highs and lows and stuff like that. I feel like that's what people want to would rather hear about than like if I give this A plus or a D, or you know what I mean, on a 10-point scale. How many points is it? You know, all that kind of shit. So I don't know. I'm rambling here. What I was gonna say though is like you just mentioned, you know, like wanting to, I guess, start shaping what will be like the next record. What's like the last song that like you were, or like song idea that you were kind of just like super excited about and that have just been kind of molding and putting together? What's that song about?
Okay, let me think about that for just a second. Trying to think of the most recent. That's a good question. What was I was kind of thinking about something today. I've kind of talked in another recent interview. I don't think it's come out yet either, but it was, we were talking. He was kind of asking about like what I was thinking about for the next record, and you know, themes and stuff like that. And one thing that I've just been kind of thinking about a lot is I think that the last record was kind of a bit of a coming of age kind of a theme. A lot of the songs kind of center around a particular stage in life where you're kind of in that early to mid-20s in a new city, trying to go after something that's as difficult and weird as a music career, and just kind of the, you know, the anxieties that go along with that, the, you know, the general heartbreaks that exist in that time of life, right? And all of it, you know, is particularized to what I was experiencing. And so the next record is similar in that it's, you know, another kind of snapshot in a stage of life, but the stage of life is different. Like, oh, you know, today's my 3rd wedding anniversary. And so I've, you know, since the record's been out, like I've kind of conceptualized my life a little bit differently. Like when I was writing Good Old Fashioned Pain, I was living in an apartment by myself. I had my room to myself, but I had, you know, 5 other dudes that I lived with as roommates. As I wrote about it on the song "Hole in the Wall," and in every word of that song is true. You know, I kind of lived in that sort of a apartment, and now I'm like, you know, we bought a house last year, and we're, you know, a little bit more domestic. Everything's a little bit different. And so the things that I've been thinking about obviously are different. I guess is the rambling point I eventually got to was, so, you know, I mean, it's not particularly uplifting stuff, but I'm thinking a lot more about, you know, I think when you have somebody else in your life that depends on you in that sort of a way, like when you're in a marriage or something like that, yeah, a relationship, the things that you start thinking about sometimes are a little bit less uplifting. Things like mortality and, you know, like aging, and, you know, there's just more themes about stuff like that. So I can't even think about the very last song that I was working at. Oh, you know what? It was it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek idea that I was working on, kind of an up-tempo sort of a tune about like accepting your mortality, but then also hoping that you don't suffer very much on the way out. And that kind of struck me as not, you know, to most people that's like, dude, that's just morbid and weird. Like, why are you writing about that? But that's just something that I was thinking about, was like that kind of weird juxtaposition of like coming to terms with it, but at the same time, like maybe we could just like, maybe it could not be like that bad on the way out. And so I was kind of writing about that. Who knows if that'll end up actually on a record or not, but you know, that's kind of where my brain was at last time I sat down.
Yeah, like one of my grandmas, she always she's like, I don't want to get old, you know, like in the in the sense of like where everyone has to start taking care of me again or something, you know. That's like, yeah, it's interesting to think about how you age, and like you don't want to get to that point where, you know, you go back into diapers, you know, that kind of thing, where like you feel like you're a burden on other people, you know. It's such a strangeness to it. What I was gonna say though about like what's interesting about those coming of age kind of themes and vibes off the record. What's really interesting about, I guess like this is more like a comment on our society at large. It's like you're almost always taught like or told like those are going to be like the best years of your life, like your early 20s. And like after like living through that point, I'm like, no, like that was just all
Yeah,
like
I hope not.
that was all just like stress and like going like, well, things are not moving at the rate that I thought they were going to be. I
Hmm.
thought, like it's such a there is that anxiety, that stress that like, you feel like you're trying to I guess like you're doing a lot of rubbernecking in a lot of sense, like trying to like figure out if other people are progressing further than and like
Yeah.
obviously like we've grown up in a social media driven age where everyone's posting the good stuff in their life. You're not posting like the all the bad stuff. So like it's very easy to get a warped sense of what your life is and what other people's lives are. And like that's I don't know. I feel like the the mid I guess like the early to mid-20s records are important to help you like get a better foundation, a better grip on what reality actually is.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, the environment was, I moved to Nashville, in January 2014. I had just turned 22, and that like, oh, and to set it up too, like I didn't do I didn't do college after high school. I kind of hung around in my hometown for a couple of years, like playing in bands and trying to, figure out songwriting more. Like I had been playing in bands since I was in probably eighth or ninth grade, but um, I was like, okay, we're gonna really, really try. We're playing Athens, playing Atlanta, stuff like that, and eventually it just kind of became clear that if I want to give it like a real shot, I need to put myself in an environment where I can learn and improve even more. And so moving to Nashville was almost kind of like that. I really feel like the first few years that I was here felt like a 4-year degree in like everything that you shouldn't do if you want to make music for a living. All the songs you shouldn't write, which ones are bad, how to write a good one, and you really get like a crash course if you're going and paying attention. And so just like through all that, that's kind of where my head was at while I was writing all these songs. It was almost kind of trying to rediscover a songwriting style, I guess, because I really changed a lot about the way that I was writing once I moved up here. I was, starting to write a little bit more directly and like more intentionally, stuff like that, instead of, a lot of my older stuff is a little bit more impressionistic and not quite as, it was, it was more about moods and stuff like that. So it was definitely I'm glad that I made the record for sure, because um, reflecting on it, I learned quite a bit about myself and how to deal with myself and live with myself. So I think that's a good thing overall.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you'll hear a lot of people like I guess go against, oh, this ex songwriter's moving to Nashville or moving to LA or Austin
Mm-hmm.
or New York or wherever their general hub of songwriting or culture is. And you'll see people like kind of go against that, but like that's like a testing ground that makes you a better, or in most cases it makes you a better artist because you're being thrown off into the deep end and you have to you know or maybe not, maybe that's not the great analogy. It's like trying to jump on like a treadmill that's already at full speed or something, and trying
Yeah.
to like find your your footing. And I don't know, I guess like it kind of goes back to the iron sharpens iron, like you're around enough people doing work better than you, you know, you're going to get better as a result.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I'm not even really trying to imply that if you don't move to Nashville, then you can't have a music career or anything like that. But I was just, you know, for myself, I felt like I needed to put myself right in the epicenter of particularly country music specifically. Right. And, you know, that's, you know, love it or hate it. This is kind of where a lot of stuff, you know, a lot of deals are made, a lot of, you know, networking is to be done, stuff like that. So just kind of thrust myself into it. And, you know, there's definitely aspects of living here that I greatly dislike. You know, I mean, it's kind of funny, having come up in a very different kind of a music scene in Georgia. Kind of came up playing in like the early 2000s, like emo and hardcore and punk and, you know, stuff like that. Like where a lot of times I'd be like this weird folk artist opening up for like, you know, just a absolute thrashing metalcore band, you know, just sitting on the stage with the acoustic guitar. Cause like there was such a want back then, like a yearning back then for music that everybody was just like, let's just have all of it all at the same time. And we'd all, you know, meet at some all ages venue and just do shows all the time. And, so coming from that, where everything was just kind of like people were, you know, and it was also, I know that that's like also a time and a place sort of a thing. Like when you're of a certain age, you know, you're still in your teens most of the time. Like most people aren't even of drinking age, you know, it's just a little bit of a different experience coming up. And then, I mean, you come here and like the majority of the shows that you're going to play in Nashville are going to be occupied by other songwriters in the seats. And it's not that other songwriters aren't supportive or anything like that, but that's a different audience than people that are just like, oh dude, we just want some music, you know? So a lot of times when you do like songwriter show here, you know, this may not be happening, but you may feel like you're being picked apart, you know, line by line, you know, cause you know, songwriters can't help but like sort of dissect the song. That's like our craft. That's why we're here. We really want to learn how to get better. So it's just like a totally different environment, and that can kind of bum you out a little bit. And, you know, but I think, you know, overall, I'm glad that I pushed myself to make the move for sure though.
Yeah. It's I guess like songwriters, it's almost even not necessarily where, you know, they're going to pick apart a song as far as, you know, this line is shitty, this line is great or anything, but they're almost like mechanics. They want to like take the engine apart and put it back together. You know,
yeah, that's
like
exactly what I mean.
Yeah. And it's so you said, yeah, you grew up in Georgia. Your local scene, I kind of feel like probably in a lot of ways like what Lubbock was that's where I'm from or where I live. In this like, I guess 05 or 00 to like 2010. I moved here in 2005. So,
Okay.
Where it's not big enough to have like so many, like the music scene in general is not big enough, where you have only, you know, the country shows, the folk shows, the alt rock, you know what I mean? It's like, there's only X amount of, artists here, so they all had to play shows together. So you'd have like this really, you know, diverse blend of, you know, yeah, like the singer-songwriter up there with just his guitar, and then you'd have like a alt country band, and then you'd have like a emo band for, you know, a 20-minute
totally.
set. Like I feel like that is very, you know, it's very important to be able to do that where it kind of goes to that whole like thing about having like X amount of hours of experience, you know, like that's a place where you can play and like get better without being like overly judged.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those cool opportunities too, because when you have a more like diverse audience, you know, that may not be there to see the alt country band, maybe they're there to see the punk band or whatever. Like if you can win those people over, like you'll learn a great deal about performing, you know. There's definitely something to be said for not a hostile audience necessarily, but more like an ambivalent audience. You know, winning over an ambivalent audience is a huge deal, right? It's definitely like a gigantic what am I trying to say? Rite of passage almost as an artist. And I felt like that was part of the experience was like, I would, for a long time, I was kind of writing the more kind of alt country folk rock kind of songs, but I hadn't formed a band yet. And so I would just kind of be playing these acoustic tunes, and, everybody in the venue has got like straight edge shirts and like, gym shorts, and they're there to like throw down when the next band, like there's going to be a circle pit like right in front of the stage as soon as the next band pops off. Right. And, so like, but, everybody there really like music. So a lot of times you could just like, you could hit them with something and like, and win them over. And that was like a very, satisfying thing. Like as a young songwriter, was like winning that group over, Yeah.
Like what this reminds me of is, I guess it was probably, I don't know, 2007, 2008. I was at South by, and I went to a show. It was at Emo's, and like the lineup was literally like, so like the punk band The Bronx, they had like a side project called Mariachi El Bronx. So it was like that version of that band of like this mariachi music. Then I can't remember who else played in between there, but it was like them, Dillinger Escape Plan, and then Nas and Damian Marley. So like it was such a like just like I just backed up after it was Mariachi El Bronx, then someone else, and then Dillinger Escape Plan, and I just was like, I can't be in here. Like, like, at least I need to be on the edge because that's too much for me.
I'm not cut out for this. What's about to happen?
Yeah, like I remember like what I was really wanting to go there for was the Nas Damian Marley collaboration stuff, and so it was like one of those things. Yeah, you had such a diverse crowd in there, because like you just had people showing up for these specific bands and staying the whole time because like what else are you gonna do? You're not gonna lose your spot.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your spot. Exactly. Yeah, man, that's a lot of fun, man. That kind of makes me a little bit nostalgic.
Yeah, I always like I used to go to South by like every year, and I guess like my last year I just felt like I was just like the old man going, there's too many people here, there's too much traffic, it's too hot. And like I'm not old or anything like that, but I was probably like 27 or 28, and I was just like I'm done right now. It's I'm gonna tap out. No more of this unless it's in a, I don't know, more controlled environment. I don't know.
Yeah. I can definitely sympathize with that, especially nowadays. It's like sometimes, like, me and my wife kind of have a joke in Nashville too, where like, just, you spend so much time doing music stuff that it's almost like one time we were down at the beach down in Florida, and we were just trying to find a bite to eat. And we walked into a place, and there was like a dude playing, Jimmy Buffett songs or whatever. And we were just like, not tonight. We can't hear music right now. Like we just want to eat, like, and we literally we just went someplace else because we were just so tired of live music after a while, especially in Nashville. Like you can't go hardly anywhere without, somebody playing songs. Like I was sitting out on my porch last night, and I don't even know where it was coming from, but there was some dude with an acoustic guitar singing into some microphone somewhere. I have no clue. And I don't even live in like a very populous neighborhood. Like it's not like there's a bunch of bars and stuff. So I have no clue where it was coming from, but it was definitively a live musician performing somewhere. And I just heard, I was like, can't even go on my porch, man. But there is some amount of fun in that too, though.
Right. I remember, are you familiar with Susan Gibson? It's like she wrote Wide Open Spaces. And
well, yeah, no, I'm familiar with that song, but not with her.
Okay, so she's she I guess was down in Austin for a long time, and we had this conversation one time about like that, where Austin, the quote unquote live music capital of the world, and the whole, just like kind of like jumping the shark on that, where every restaurant, if they had like just they would take out a table or something just to put a a spot for like a songwriter and a guitar, and it's
Oh yeah.
like not every space needs that, like
No, I guess
let it be.
I'm sure that it's super fun for tourists, people from out of town, stuff like that. Because I try to like remind myself too that like most places in the country don't have like live music is somewhat of a luxury. Like it's an event. It's something that
Right.
you have to like intentionally go to. And so it's obviously a joke and take it for granted here a little bit just because you're kind of inundated with it. But I'm sure for people that are like coming from like a smaller town or whatever, they're like, oh man, this is awesome. Like everybody can play and sing, and it's probably thrilling and for the
Yeah, yeah.
But it is really funny though, because especially like how out of context it'll be sometimes. Where like you'll just be at a random Mexican restaurant or something, and it's and you've got a guy up on a stool playing like like super like top 40s like pop country stuff. You're like, this is weird. Like, you know all these songs are like they don't exactly fit the mood that I'd like to be in. These are kind of sad or like weird.
Yeah. The so I grew up in Fort Stockton, which is like, this little small town in West Texas on Interstate 10, you know, uh, 300 miles away from like any kind of like cultural significance as far as, MTV, VH, that kind, you get what I'm saying.
Hmm.
But like there was this, we didn't have a whole lot of music happening. I remember like growing up, there would be, if there was music, it was intentional, right? There would be a concert.
Yeah.
Colin Ray would come in or whoever the case, right? But there was this one restaurant that my parents would always go to where this lady would play guitar, and it was all like just top 40 covers, and it wasn't like she was bad or nothing like that, but it was obviously it wasn't bad. But I remember her playing like Rhinestone Cowboy and stuff like that, and for Fort Stockton, that was like, oh my gosh, this is really awesome. But obviously, if this is in Austin or Nashville or wherever else, it's just like one of the, another brick in the wall of the same kind of artist doing the same thing, And I guess like I don't know, it just long story short, you get like ear fatigue, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
For sure.
I don't know, I just.
This episode is sponsored by Wicker's Mesquite Smoked Jalapeno Jelly. It's owned and operated by my buddy Wes Wicker, who makes the jelly in small batches for the best quality and freshness. He smokes the peppers with mesquite and uses pure cane sugar to make the jelly. What you get is this great blend of smoky, sweet, and spicy. It's addictively savory. For those uninitiated, Wicker's is a great addition to any chef's kitchen. Part of what makes Wicker's so great is just how versatile it really is. For starters, it makes a great meat glaze. Throw it on a batch of hot wings, use it on some pork ribs, some pork chops, really whatever you can think of. Eat it on biscuits, cornbread, bagels, or toast. Throw it on a ham or turkey sandwich. Another super simple but effective way is to get some cream cheese, throw some Wickers on top, and then grab your favorite cracker. Wickers is currently stocked at a handful of places in Lubbock and on the South Plains, as well as some Fort Worth and DFW locations. But the easiest way to get your hands on a jar is to head over to wickerstx.com. That's WICKERSTX.com. I'll throw a link into the show notes for good measure. They currently come in two varieties, original and now hot, if you need just a little bit more kick in your bite. You can order anything from one jar to a case of 12, whatever fits your needs. Again, that's wickerstx.com. Okay, back to the show.
One of the things I wanted to get back to was, so your sound is very, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like this like modern kind of Nashville where it is some of the alt country, and it is like some like old school kind of country in your vocals, especially.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is like this, some pop sensibilities, and not necessarily like in a. I would almost say like not in a like a top 40 Nashville kind of way, but like more just like really just great pop sensibilities outside of country. Where I guess like where do you feel like you've kind of taken all these little pieces and kind of blended them together to be like what like I said, kind of like a little bit of like what modern Nashville is kind of known for as far as like having these sounds go.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, when I was probably, I don't know, 17 or so, I got real interested in the alt country kind of deal. And, there was, those early Wilco records, and Drive By Truckers was in Athens just down the road. And like, I think it was even before like Jason Isbell had put out solo records, and there was like, of course, like the, Jayhawks and Whiskey Town and stuff like that. Like there was a lot of really cool music. And I got turned on to that primarily because, like, kind of in a roundabout way, I think, because I grew up always hearing country music, like top 40 stuff. There's, in the, especially like in the 90s, you got Brooks and Dunn and Garth Brooks, stuff like that. And I kind of started to associate that style of music with people that I was like, people that I honestly didn't get along with very well. Cause like for when I was like 7, we moved down to Florida near Daytona Beach for 5 years. And I got really into punk rock and skateboarding and stuff while I was down there. Cause I lived there between the ages of 7 and 12. So it was like, like I think like 10, 11, 12 is like the perfect time to like start getting into like a little, you start getting turned on to a little bit of edgier music or whatever. And so when we moved back to Georgia 5 years later, it was a really different culture than all my friends were down in Florida. Like I said, like we were going skateboarding, and we like kind of like loud music, and that whole thing. We dressed differently, like everybody wore Converse and Vans and stuff, and band shirts, and just that kind of whole thing. So I moved up to Georgia, and I didn't fit in very well in school. In 7th grade was the first year. There was kind of a bit more of a culture of like I don't even know like what you would call the style or whatever, maybe the jock thing or whatever. But like in my town in Florida, like the mall didn't have an Abercrombie until much later after we moved. So like there was like, that was like the style in Georgia, right? Everybody was kind of like in khaki shorts and like polo shirts. And I came up in like girls jeans and Converse at like 13, and like longer hair, and like people, like I got tortured in middle school. And like, so I started to associate like on all those people, they liked radio country. And so I think like unfairly started to resent it a little bit as like, whatever is associated with people that are, being really mean to me or whatever is stuff that I'm just not going to interface with at all, And so for a long time, I just didn't pay any attention to it. And I played a lot of different kinds of music for a long time. And then I think what happened was like through that whole scene, eventually I got turned on to some of the older songwriters that inspired people that I was listening to. And I ended up, getting turned on to Bob Dylan and Johnny Cash and stuff like that. And through like Dylan and folk music and Johnny Cash and old country, and then like even, stuff like I was saying, that alt country stuff that started to trickle in, Ryan Adams and stuff like that. It made me rediscover that I really loved the sound of that music. And it was kind of like it honestly was like a big deal because, and like my parents joked about it too at the time, because I was like, I had turned like a corner to where I was like, I'm kind of really digging this country stuff. And I sound way better trying to sing it, because I used to like guys that I was in bands and, would joke that like, you kind of have a little bit of a twang in your voice. It's kind of weird. You think that you could tone that down? We're trying to be a cool rock band. And it just kind of, I rediscovered my love of that type of music. And, through all that, I got really into, of course, Townes Van Zandt and Guy Clark and John Prine, all the greats, and sort of the, country folk and Americana tradition and stuff like that. And so I think that I probably kept some of the maybe melodic sensibility or something from that indie rock stuff that I really liked, or some of that more whatever. And, it's just kind of all of my influences all put together, I guess, which I realized that was a very long story for a simple question, but
no, I mean, I it's one of those things I always, when you said something about when you're like 8 to 12, that's when you start like listening to edgier music. It's almost like, that's like the time whenever you're like, whatever my parents like is just not cool. And I've got to rebel
I
whatever
think that has something
against,
to do with it for sure.
Yeah, whatever they are listening to, whatever kind of fans they are. No way. Absolutely not. I have to go find my own thing. And then like, well, you kind of like,
oh yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean like you embrace that but at some point you almost like, you do come back home to whatever that sound is, and you go, this is not as bad as I thought it was at 12, or whatever the case is.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because like I think I'm trying to think of one of like the big albums that like shifted the perspective a little bit, but it was probably I'm trying to think of the year, maybe 2006. There was a Bright Eyes record called Casadega, and I love that record. But it's it kicks off with like, I mean, it has some like bona fide country songs on it, like
absolutely
steel guitars, fiddles, the whole nine yards. And when I heard that, and then I was like, oh no, I really like this. It was like, oh no, I think I like country music. This is kind of like blowing my whole shtick, like,
Yeah.
And that, I think that allowed me to kind of revisit those, because a lot of it is the sound specifically that you come to either love or hate. A lot of it, like a lot of people talk about that with country music, is like this, the songs are good, but it's just like, oh man, that twangy guitar, I just can't stand it, or that the whiny voice, I can't stand it, or whatever. That's criticisms I hear from people all the time. And like, but that was definitely a moment where I put that record on as soon as I got it, and I was like, oh no, this is country, and I really like it.
No, that is probably my favorite Bright Eyes record. I think that like Lifted is probably the quote unquote the best. And if you had to like show, the aliens come down and they're like, what is Bright Eyes? That's like the record you'd show. But like for me, I just think like Casadega has, it's like that country, but it's also like, as great of a just like straight country record it is, it also is like, a little bit left of center at the same time. So it's
yeah, totally.
The one thing I do have a criticism on though is like it is my favorite Bright Eyes record, but like the song like Soul Singer, I think it's just called Soul Singer. That's like probably like no, completely. Make a Plan to Love Me. That's the song that I'm like, this is the worst song, because it's just too. It's just like it's like one or two too many Make a Plan to Love Me's on like I don't know, like the choruses. I'm not listened to it in a long time because I don't like it that much. So
no, that's fair. I mean, that one grew on me. Like I remember, not liking that one at first, but to me that whole record to me is it's also, this was maybe we had different relationships with music back then because of the physical format that you could only get it in, and like. So you had to like really spend time with the records. And I believe that when I got that CD, I I think it was before I was driving, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And so there was no way to listen to it except for on my CD player, you know? And so like, and especially once you'd invested I don't even remember how much CDs were back then, maybe $15 or something. Like once you've invested your yard mowing money into something, you were like bound and determined to get every ounce of anything out of it, you know, because you want to get your money's worth, you know, and it was kind of, you know, there was something a little bit more difficult about acquiring the thing, you know, that, you know, so I'm saying all that to say, like, there is a lot of songs on records that I consider like my favorites that like, I just found what I liked about him because I was like, I'm going to enjoy every bit of this, you know. I have to like sop all of it up, you know.
Right. I remember because this is also like this is when records were released on Tuesdays and not Fridays. And I remember that. Going to Best Buy and buying that CD at Best Buy and like just going in specifically.
I think I may have gotten it at Walmart actually.
Yeah. But it's another like little comment on that though is like back then, yeah, when you bought a CD, it's one of those things where it's now you have access to someone's entire catalog of music, their entire discography. So it's just like, bam, right there. There's no difference between listening to Nashville Skyline by Bob Dylan and I don't know, Blood on the Tracks. You know what I mean? Even though those are like 5 years apart, or like Blonde on Blonde and Blood on the Tracks. That's probably a better example.
Sure.
10 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have it all at once. And back then, even like that's what's so strange. It's only 15 years ago, but you only had access to whatever record you had, and
or whichever your friends let you borrow too. You know.
Yeah. So like there's such a smaller sample of a person's discography. Excuse me. I remember talking about this with some friends is with the Wallflowers is everyone's like favorite record was the one with one headlight, but I didn't have that record. I had like the one that was, I think the title was Rebel Sweetheart, and the one with one headlight is Bringing Down the Horse. So like I just had like a little bit of a different experience with Wallflowers than everyone else did, or like a lot of my friends.
Yeah, totally.
Did. So I find that I miss that. I have like a nostalgia for it, but also at the same time, I love having just the access to everything, you know. So.
Oh yeah, it definitely cuts both ways for sure. Like, I feel on one hand that like it's so easy to be like up on everything now, like musically, like you can like there's no trend that you can miss out on if you don't want to. You can just like, as soon as somebody starts, getting a little hype, you're just like, oh, I'm gonna jump on Apple Music here and just like, hear it. It was like, I remember like there was almost this mystique back when I was growing up where somebody, your friend would be like, dude, have you ever heard of so-and-so? And you're like, no, I've never heard of him. How did you hear him? And they're like, dude, they're on this skate video that I saw that's on VHS and there's no way to get the song. We're going to have to like find a store to get this record. And then you go to the store and they're like, no, we don't have Jawbreaker albums. You're going to have to, and then you have to find a catalog. And then, oh, maybe somebody's older brother is going to burn it for you. There was like this kind of mystique of like, you could be in the know on something that most people couldn't access, in any real way. And there was something kind of fun about that,
Yeah, it's the effort of finding it. It's the search. And yeah, like it was also a really great place to find this new music at the time was stuff like the Tony Hawk video game. Like,
oh, totally, yeah.
Like video games had like such great soundtracks that you'd go, what is this? And I need to find whatever else by this person, and then then you start that process of trying to get that record. And of course, also at the same time, you probably relate to this too, is the anything you want at like from like 12 to 16 has like a parental advisory sticker on it, and like
Oh yeah.
they won't sell it to you.
Nope.
So you have to get
you
someone
had to figure out
else.
a way.
Yeah. So oh, that's such a strange time.
Well, and it's funny too, because it's going to be it's going to be something where in a few years or in a decade or something, you're going to have a whole generation of people that are going to look at you funny when you talk about that, about the access to music. It's going to be like a payphone,
Right.
Because it's so ubiquitous now to just access whatever you want that like people are just going to be like, what? There was a physical format that isn't vinyl, because I'm sure people still collect vinyl, but I'd be kind of surprised if there's like a CD resurgence where people are like, oh, if you want to be really cool, you have to have everything on compact disc,
Yeah. Well, that's it. I've seen some people talk about, well, I do not believe that's going to happen. I've seen a lot of people talk about cassettes coming back, or like, oh, wait till the 8-track resurgence comes. And
yeah, they're really trying on that one. I don't feel like it's tracking.
The flaw in all of that though is that with vinyl, like the quality is much higher than an MP3. Not so much with a cassette or an 8-track. So like there's not like the payoff of having the big records. So like
right. And so there's definitely like the audiophile kind of people that swear by the CD, because obviously CDs sound great.
Yeah.
I just don't know if it'll be like a centerpiece of your living room in 15 years where people are like, dude, come see my CD collection, unless they're like super into, the quality of music or whatever. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, also, this is like, we're going like really nerdy on all this stuff right here, but I've seen some people really get into like the different kind, like obviously there's MP3s and waves, and I've seen some people like just they subscribe to like TIFFs, which apparently is like even better. But what's really funny is really to appreciate any of that kind of stuff, you need like some really great fucking headphones. So
oh yeah, for sure.
like yeah. It's
like if you listen to that through your like earpod or AirPods or whatever, you're not gonna get the full thing.
Yeah, so like that's where some of the flaws I see in some of these people talking about whatever is, I don't know. So
hey, we'll see. I mean, everything that's old is new again, so who knows what will happen.
Yeah, what's interesting as it's connected is when it comes to like Spotify or anything like that with music, there's never a moment where I'm like, oh, I don't know what to listen to. But when it comes to watching something with like Netflix or HBO Max now or Hulu, I can get on there and like start searching and not know what to watch just because there's too much stuff. Do you ever have that experience?
Oh yeah, 100%. It can be almost like information overload. Like nowadays, I only watch something if somebody suggests it, almost, because I almost need like a secondary filter so that I can even choose from the just vastness of those libraries. It's like, we got on the HBO Max train. And so now I'm like trying to watch all the stuff that I like missed out on over the last decade of HBO. Like, I finally got around to watching like True Detective or whatever that I remember everybody talking about years ago. And I was like, okay, well, everybody said this is great, so I'm going to watch it. But then there's like a billion movies on there. And I'm like, I don't even know where to start with these, man. Like, because that is kind of a time investment too. And
right.
It's a funny thing. I do kind of feel like that with music sometimes. Like I've found that, one thing that's changed in my relationship with a lot of music is that it's harder for me to like really get just like knocked out by a record like I used to. Like there's so many albums that I got when I was a young teenager that when I pop them in now, I still get that same feeling of like whatever it is, from that album. And that's probably partially like a nostalgic thing, you know. But nowadays I feel like it's just harder for me to connect really, really deeply with albums. And occasionally like one slips through, you know, like, you know, Sufjan Stevens' last record, like completely leveled me for like a long time, you know, so there's exceptions, but I just feel like, you know, a lot of times it's harder to make that connection. And I wonder if that has something to do with the ease of access. It somehow like devalues it subconsciously or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I know for me, what with, I guess like with a certain level of success as a journalist, which I'm, you know, I'm not, you know, writing big old massive pieces for Vanity Fair or anything like that. But, you know, you get so much stuff sent to you that I've tried to like explain to people that sometimes like you're overloaded with that. And, you know, it's very cool to, when you get records in advance, but it's this strange thing where you have to almost give up the record once it's released. Because like once it's released, you've already written the piece about the record or that artist or whoever, you know, and it's okay. Well, what record's coming out in 2 weeks after this? I need to start working on that. And so like, It feels like I don't know. It's such a weird thing because like there's a lot of records I end up going like, oh, I love this record. But then it like the work aspect of it where you have to just kind of give it up. And there's a few records that transcend that. For me, like I guess like the band that I've feel like I just was like, oh my gosh, this is where I just kind of returned to is the stuff by The War on Drugs. Those last couple records are the ones that I wind up finding my way back to.
I need to like really sit down with those because I've only ever heard, you know, like a couple songs here and there that'll come on like playlists and stuff when I'm like at work or something. I've just, for whatever reason, that slipped under the radar for me. I haven't really sat down with the records yet. I probably should.
Yeah. Like what I love about them is they are kind of like the underappreciated era of Dylan, of like the 80s kind of stuff mixed with like Dire Straits and like some of the more, I guess, like the big themes of Springsteen. I don't know. It's like this weird, like that kind of era of music, but in 2020 or I guess like in 2015 or whenever they released 16 or something like that. So
I can get on board with that. That sounds pretty cool. That sounds like that's a good elevator pitch.
Yeah, it's like it's very much like a I don't know, like the sonic qualities, the landscape of that is just very awesome, and it's I don't know, it's just a great, like the last two records are really, they feel like they lock together. So like I kind of feel like they're like just one massive listening experience. But anyways,
yeah, no, totally.
So what I was wanting to get back to was about, I guess, like, I'm going to probably cut right there, and then I'm just going to come back in right here real quick.
Sure.
To, like, rephrase that. What I wanted to, like, end this on was, like, connecting it back to the record, you know, and, like, what you've been working on lately, which is you mentioned how, like, you know, these singles, these A-B side singles, where you're recording one song from the record and then another song, but like that song from the record, you're kind of going back to the basics or like the original intentions. Is that kind of like where I guess, like, what's the process of like trying to, I guess, go back and figure out what it was at the kind of like the quote unquote, like the acoustic version of that?
Yeah, so on the first One and Done project, I did Sorry for Growing Up, which is the last song on the record. And I wrote it on acoustic guitar. I write everything on acoustic guitar because I can't really, not very good at like piano or anything like that. So primarily everything is going to be written on acoustic. And I wrote, like, even on the album, it ends up being a piano led, almost hymn like feel is kind of what I wanted to go for with the production. And, but that original little riff was an acoustic guitar, like fingerpick thing, almost like a Guy Clark sort of a thing or something like that. And I wanted to just give like a little bit of a different angle on the tune because, maybe not that I like felt like people didn't like the album version or something, but just like a different flavor of like, this is what it sounded like in the room when I wrote it. And so we kind of recorded it like that too, with we just used a single microphone, and then we just did one full take all the way through. I think maybe we did a couple extra takes, but no cuts or edits or whatever. We just, one full take, here you go. And I was trying to think of like when I was starting that project, like which one to try to reinterpret first. And it's always, for some reason, that one is one that I feel like I got my point across as well as I could have. And I'm just I feel pretty proud with the structure and everything with that one. So it was kind of an obvious pick, just specifically also because of the instrumentation being so different. So, and then we did that was the one we did the Elliott Smith cover on too.
Yeah. Well, what I like is, I like when an artist does that kind of thing where, with alternate versions or like just another spin on it, a different angle, because I feel like it adds and provides like another additional context for that song, or especially with you kind of framing it as like, this is what it sounded like when it was just me and the guitar. I love that kind of aspect of like when you do something with a collection of songs or whatever the case is.
Yeah, I was trying to like just give like sometimes maybe you can cut so that I'm not so rambly, but sometimes I feel like songs can get a little bit buried in the production sometimes, and it's not necessarily negative all the time, but it's kind of, I just felt that it was kind of important for some of these tunes to just like strip everything back and just be like, here's a tune. Here's a totally different little take on it. You can kind of hear the lyrics in a different context. You can, maybe connect with it a little bit differently if you are generally turned off by more production or, whatever. So it was definitely really fun for me to do.
Yeah. Well, also at the same time, it's one of those things where, if these were the full length versions, it would kind of take you out of like that, the bedrock of that record, because you guys do such a good job of creating a certain palette that you're working with. And if you just if you just make a stark change where you're not really painting with those colors, it can just change the feel, or you know what I mean. So I think
totally.
I always subscribe to like, just because a song is written this certain way doesn't mean it can't be played this way, or you know what I mean. There's a million different ways to make a song work, and for various reasons. So I mean, or settings, or whatever the case is. So you mentioned doing the Elliott Smith track, and I don't know. We talked a little bit before we recorded, but like that song is such a great. It just has such a great melody to it and a great finger picking style. And I guess like where did that come from? Or how did you guys decide to throw that into as a track on here?
Well, originally we were just gonna do acoustic singles, just do the originals from the record, little reinterpretations or whatever. And then while we were just kind of setting levels and sound checking before we started recording, I just started playing that one just because I like it. And it was one of those kind of early tunes that I tried to learn how to finger pick because of. I tried to, like, that was one of those early ones that had that style of like playing a melody with your other fingers. And like, so I don't play it perfectly by any stretch on the recording, but while I was playing that, Brendan St. Chalet, who produced it, was like, dude, we should just hit record on that and do it. And I was kind of like, that's like, I was a little bit hesitant just because, like in the context of like a country record, I was kind of afraid that it would kind of alienate people a bit. But then I was kind of like, man, this is kind of like more broader context to like, where I come from as a songwriter, and so if it'll give people a little bit of an idea of like, the kind of stuff that really inspired me, and so then that kind of snowballed into, okay, well, when I do these one and done projects, I'm going to do one of mine, and then I'm going to do a kind of off the wall cover of something that like inspired me fairly early, something that you wouldn't expect, generally something that's not considered country or like a standard, something like that, and just kind of put my own spin on them. So the first one we did was the Elliott Smith one, and just love that. So I've always loved that song. It's just, it's kind of haunting and kind of not 100% sure what it's about all the time. It makes you feel kind of dislocated, and it's a really cool song. And I love all of his music. So he was a super, super inspirational as a songwriter to me, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and as an arranger and everything else too. It's like, I think a lot about his records when I'm thinking about arrangements and stuff for my records. Like, I don't have the melodic sensibility. Like, I think few people have the melodic sensibility that he had, where he would almost play like these Beatles-esque, I kind of hate saying Beatles-esque, but these sort of like a lot of interesting chords and like, weird harmonies and like all kinds of stuff that I partially am incapable of because of my ability on guitar. Like, he was also I think an extremely underrated guitar player. Some of the stuff that he does is very interesting and really cool. And so I think a lot about the way that his records are produced, especially some of those later ones where it's a lot more full band, a lot more arranged, and just the interlocking parts and just the overall tones and feel. And so it felt like a fitting cover for the first one.
Yeah. And also it connects back to kind of like that feeling, though, the early 20s feeling that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Cause he really channels a lot of the anxieties of young adulthood. And
for sure. Yeah.
What do you have going forward? I'm assuming you're going to have a volume 3 at some point. When do you think that's going to?
I haven't decided yet. So there's nothing like in the hopper at the moment, like anything that I've already recorded. So, for the second one, I kind of did a reinterpretation of the title track, and then I did a Get Up Kids song. Get Up Kids are a great band. That especially this particular song, Overdue, was a huge like lyrical inspiration for me, because it was like one of the early songs that I remember where I felt like it was just so direct and biting, and it just kind of like changed a little bit of the way that I viewed how you could write something so like serious to somebody else, right? But for the third one, I'd like to do one. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. I need to maybe some people can DM me some suggestions of what they'd like to hear acoustically.
Yeah, we can. We'll throw that question out to the general audience here. Yeah. It's been really great talking with you today about.
Oh man, thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of New Slang. Be sure to check out Taylor Alexander's Good Old Fashioned Pain. Check out episode sponsors The Blue Light Live and Wicker's Jalapeno Jelly. Okay, I'll see y'all later in the week for another episode and interview.